Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the North Lincolnshire series, a district of 56 parishes in the north of Lincolnshire. Let's see which one we're visiting today. Welcome back to North Lincolnshire once again, ladies and gentlemen, and to the penultimate parish on the Isle of Axholme. And speaking of Axholme, behind me here we have the Axholme Academy, which is a secondary school which you'll find between the two places that make this parish what it is. To the north you've got one of them, and to the south you've got the other, and they are inextricably linked together. Welcome to the town of Crowle and Ealand. This North Lincolnshire episode is sponsored by Past Days, a family history blog by June Terrington. You'll find her link in the description. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Crowle and Ealand is a town situated on the Isle of Axholme, just to the north of the M180 at Junction 2. It lies on the A161, the main road between Goole and Gainsborough. The two main settlements are Crowle, which developed into a market town in the 12th and 13th centuries with the support of the Abbot of Selby, and Ealand, which has a much more village-like feel. Once again, this is another place whose economy originally was based on agriculture, hunting and fishing, although through time it's seen the production of sackcloth, hemp and flax as well. Other employment was available in a brickworks located to the south of the town centre, as well as in milling and brewing, because the town had both mills and a brewery at one time, now all long gone. Trade was enhanced by the arrival of the railways, notably the Axholme Joint Railway linking Crowle to Goole. A major feature of it was Crowle Swing Bridge, which carried it over another vitally important trade route, the Stainforth and Kidby Canal. And that brings us to Ealand, where Crowle's wharf was located on the canal. Ealand's village signs even read Historic Canal Crossing. Modern day Crowle, and Ealand for that matter, are much more about being residential. Many people who live here take advantage of its proximity to the motorway, to Scunthorpe, to Goole and to Doncaster, but I'd like to think all that history still gets the spotlight it deserves. Our route around Crowle begins and ends on Potts Lane. Our first landmark is what appears to be a telephone exchange, the biggest clue being the word exchange written on the gate. Now, I'll get this out of the way before we get into this one. Crowle is sometimes pronounced Crewle, likely a hangover from the time of the Domesday Book, where it's listed as such. The Domesday Book entry is interesting because the church here at that time was the only one on the Isle of Axholme to be mentioned. It also says Crowle had the most fisheries in Lincolnshire. I love those quirky little facts. Let's see what else this walk around brings us. Straight away, we've got an advert for the Crowle Show, which this year was on the 17th of July. Okay, so we're just to the south of the town centre here after beginning on Potts Lane. There's a couple of interesting things right here. Behind me, you can see what looks like a bridal shop, Elizabeth Kate. And then if we turn sort of leftish, This big white building is the former Crowle Parish workhouse. It says it on the wall. And I was quite interested in what was behind this, to be quite frank. Anybody know what this used to be or is going to be? Crowle does well for itself in terms of looking neat and tidy. I was loving these flowers, for example. I'd describe it as a welcoming little corner of North Lincolnshire. All around the town you'll find these green heritage plaques on some buildings. This one on the workhouse tells us that after use as such, rope and twine were manufactured here until 1862. Make no mistake about it, Crowle had lots of industry. You would never know just by passing through it. You will though notice quite a few local businesses, like for example this barber's. The centre of Crowle is quite narrow. The A161 has a traffic lighted area between the White Hart pub, which is here, and the base of the town council, which we'll see as we journey around. Also here is the former Mason's Arms, which has been known as both the Traveller's Rest and the Duke of Wellington in times past. It had spaces for horses and carts too in the 1800s. Okay, so the route through the town centre is quite a zigzaggy line because it's not just a straight town centre there's bits all over the place which I can catch. And we're beginning the town centre at the White Hart, which you can see here. Now above the door there's a very bold claim, the oldest inn in the Isle of Axholme. Given it dates from the 16th century, it could well be. Timbers exposed during building works in 1980 suggested the present building incorporated two adjoining timber-framed houses. That brings us into the marketplace, and you're looking at Crowle's chippy and a local butcher's. Crowle was historically a market town, and its first charter was awarded in 1305 by Edward I. Here's the Market Hall, which was designed by William Hull of Northampton. Its foundation stone is dated 1869. Amongst other things, this has been used as a picture palace according to its plaque. Just before we turn away from the marketplace, there's a board which details some of the town's industrial history. It used to be heaving according to this, with many trades. Crowle does well in terms of retail facilities. It can sure hold its own. Here's one of the current crop of shops in the town, a large co-op store on the edge of the marketplace. Okay, next we're going down Johnson's Lane, but we will be back to the marketplace in a short while because the route will come basically around here and then down this bit of the high street before branching off again. So we will see the town centre again before we're finished. After a trip through a small residential area, we come to the rear of the old vicarage as we head towards Church Street and the Grade 1 listed parish church of St Oswald, built in 1150. St Oswald's has 12th century architecture in its nave and its chancel. The building was modified and partially rebuilt in subsequent centuries, which included a major restoration in 1884. Now I'm hoping this church is open. Oh, the bells! Always like to hear those. Cool. As I was saying before I was rudely interrupted by the bells, I'm hoping that this church is open because it would be nice to see something called the Crowle Stone. If not, it doesn't matter. I do know where I can find some pictures of it. Unfortunately, the church was locked. Whilst you look at this flagpole and a cross shaft in the churchyard, I'll tell you about the Crowle Stone. It's a runic cross dating back to Anglo-Saxon times. Originally carved as a cross shaft until 1919, it was used as a lintel here over the west door. Its preservation is almost certainly as a result of Norman masons reusing it when the church was built. Crowle also has several other churches in addition to St Oswald's. These include churches for Catholics, Baptists, Methodists, Primitive Methodists and Congregationalists. We'll catch most of those buildings as we continue around the route. Here we have the vicarage again, and this is where I learned it's been turned into apartments, thanks to the sign on the wall. There are no signs on this building, but this was the Crowle Youth Centre, now based in the Market Hall. One of the houses next to this is the base of Pentangle Pottery, the website for which I've linked below. So it's a little bit disappointing the church wasn't open, so we couldn't see the Crowle stone. But never fear, like I said, I do know some places on the internet where I can find some pictures of the Crowle stone, and so it will come your way later in the picture bit. This next building, the one on the left, is Oswald House. Both it and the hall next door were owned by Cornelius Peacock in the 1800s. It was once owned by Thomas Cranage too, of the Isle of Axholme brewery. Next up we have the War Memorial. This is just for Crowle, as Ealand has its own. There are 69 names listed on it for World War I and 22 for World War II. A quick look up Chancery Lane, because we won't come at it from its other end. Here we find a medical centre. Crowle also has a vets as well, which is something we won't pass. Now we find ourselves looking at the base of the town council at the crossroads where Chancery Lane, Church Street and the A161 all meet. On the wall we have a parish notice board. There's more than a bit going on in this town, there's loads of notices. That's what I like to see though, an active, close-knit community. Now of course a settlement this big is of course served by buses, and we have the number 90 here, which runs to Scunthorpe bus station Mondays to Saturdays. No Sunday service though, or on bank holidays. And you can pick it up here outside Crowle and Ealand Town Council. It's back into the town centre next, so that means more shops. One shop we haven't seen is a Tesco Express, located within the old Regal Cinema further up the high street. That's in today's picture bit. The name Brunye is important to Crowle. One reason is because the Cross Keys Hotel, this building here, was built by Nathaniel Brunye in 1832. It would remain in the Brunye family until 1920. One characteristic of Crowle I find totally charming would be the network of small alleyways you find between some buildings. This one will link us to a road named Fieldside. The alleyway runs along the front of the Crowle Liberal Social and Sports Club. Now, keep this building in mind, because in a few moments there's a building you may mix this up with. Opposite this we have Fieldside Nurseries, which is a local family-run garden centre and nurseries which supplies a wide range of bedding plants and hanging baskets, amongst other things. Now of course, with Crowle not being far from Epworth, Methodism was quite strong in this town. There is still a Methodist chapel, an active one here, dated 1904 according to the stone above the door. To go with the chapel, here's the former Wesleyan Sunday School on the corner of West Terrace Street. The date stone here reads 1882, predating the current chapel. Next we have a Catholic school. Catholicism is strong in Crowle thanks to an influx of Irish labourers in the 19th century. At that time, there was nowhere locally for them to receive Mass. After failing to establish a new Catholic parish in Crowle to accommodate them, the Canons Regular of Premontre, a religious order founded by St Norbert based in Antwerp, Belgium, were invited to live and work in Crowle. This building is the resulting Catholic church, which has an attached house in which the canons lived. The building was opened in 1872 and a school was built in 1873. This area is almost all about religious buildings. This is the Congregationalist Chapel, built on the western side of Fieldside in 1880. It's now been converted into a furniture sales room. Crowle is definitely one of those places where there's things everywhere you look. I mean, I could have filmed another 10 shots down there, the amount of stuff that's along Fieldside. There's also a fire station here, you can catch that, next to that chapel. And then across the way, we've got Green Acres residential care home. There's a lot in this place. Now this is the building which might be confused for the other Liberal Club. Google lists this as the Crowle Liberal Working Men's Club, although to be honest, it doesn't look very open now. Fieldside ends at this roundabout, where we're taking a right turn up Mill Road. There's more than just a bit up this street as well. The clue is sort of in the name. Mill Road had no less than 3 windmills. Crowle had 4 in total, the 4th one being on Godno Road, according to a map of the town in 1893. Here's the former Baptist chapel. They were active in the town from as far back as 1599. Their original building was demolished in 1879 and this new one was built in its place. It closed in 2010. Okay, so I'm on Mill Road now and my mind's got a bit blank at the moment because I planned to come down here. My route, you know, follows this road for a short time and I can't remember why. I put it on my route. I suppose I'll find out in a few moments. I quickly remembered after I said that, but it's not this. This was something of a bonus. Welcome to Crowle's main cemetery, an elongated plot of land stretching northwards from Mill Road. With all that industry came a boom in population. By 1871, Crowle's population was well over 3,000. With life also comes death, so naturally a cemetery sooner or later had to become a thing. Crowle's burial board was created in 1862. That's the date on the central arch between its 2 mortuary chapels. One of these is now used to store equipment for the maintenance of the cemetery. Sometimes the clues as to what things used to be are pretty obvious. Take a look at this. We've got a house here which is situated on top of like a little grass bank and a very wide open space next to it. Now this might just look like an ordinary field, but this is a former railway line. This is where the Axholme Joint Railway used to run. And it used to run over this road and through what's now a housing estate. This is what I came up here for. You're looking at the former track bed of the Axholme Joint Railway, which opened in 1905. Crowle was linked to Goole in the north and Haxey Junction in the south. The line's route can be seen on overhead satellite images. It crossed the Stainforth and Kidby Canal on a swing bridge before running through Belton. You might recall me walking on the line's route there. Next, we're off up East Toft Road, but before we do, I nipped onto Woodland Avenue to catch the Crowle Community Hall. This is a charity-run hall by a voluntary, unpaid trustees committee. On to East Toft Road, and we're at the Pinfold. No need to go over again what these were used for, but this one only half exists now, thanks to a cottage being partially built on it in 1883. This sign points us towards Crowle Moors Nature Reserve, one of the richest lowland peat vegetation areas in England, although the peat here was not as thick as that on Thorn or Hatfield Moors. Okay, we've reached an area of the town where I had a choice of where to go next. There are 2 or 3 ways I could do this. I think the route I've planned is the most sensible. So basically from this garage here, we're going up this road, taking that left there, which is called Cross Slack, and across some what look like residential areas, and then coming back down towards one of Crowle's schools to head back to where we began. There was plenty of ways I could have done this part. I think I've chosen the right way though. We've mentioned the breweries a few times already. Crowle had 2. Up here was the Isle of Axholme brewery. There are houses on the site now, but the history lives on thanks to the road signs. This part of Crowle is what my mother would call old worldy. Seems to be very narrow streets, very old terraced houses, terraced cottages, interspersed with a few new builds as well, because for example, you've got that bungalow there, which is definitely not old. In the late 1800s, Crowle had a national school. We've not discussed modern primary schools yet. Here's Crowle's primary school with over 250 pupils on roll. Axholme Academy provides secondary education. This whole area of Crowle to the west of the town centre, by the way, is known as Windsor, characterised by its street names Windsor Road, Windsor Lane and Windsor Crescent. And with that, we are back to Potts Lane, where I parked the car about an hour and a half ago. We're not finished with this place though, not by a long shot yet. I met a guy while I was walking around Crowle earlier, and he asked me, have I been to Ealand yet? And no, I have not yet been to Ealand. You can't really do Crowle without talking about Ealand. This place only gives you half the story of this slice of North Lincolnshire. So let's hop in the car and let's go see what Ealand's all about. On the way to Ealand, I swung by the Crowle and Ealand playing field, also known as Windsor Park, which is located off Godno Road, to check out some of the town's sports facilities. The playing field has a number of football pitches, and the committee which looks after the field recently acquired funding to create a children's play area located in front of the field's pavilion. This is where the junior football team Crowle Colts play their home matches. They were formed in 1992 and have a whopping 16 teams from the under-7s right through to the under-16s. So here we are in Ealand, and we begin at the train station. This is Crowle Station, and there are two major things to talk about here. First of all, the station itself, but also what runs behind it. You might just be able to see some water. That is the Stainforth and Kidby Canal. Let's go. So here we are at Crowle Station, which is actually in Ealand. This is a station with very limited facilities. It's on the South Humberside line, and the next station to the east is Althorpe. There used to be a signal box here which has now been demolished, and to the west there used to be a small halt called Godno Bridge, which closed in 1917, but the platform for it still exists. Crossing both the railway line and the Stainforth and Kidby Canal is a bridge which carries the A161 south from Crowle towards a very oddly shaped road junction with the A18 before it hits the M180. This stretch of the canal's towpath has been upgraded in recent years. It's a pleasant walking and cycling route now. I'll also use this opportunity to talk a bit about the now demolished Crowle Swing Bridge. A swing bridge was a necessity as humber keel barges which used the canal had very tall sails. It was completed in 1905. Evidence of the bridge's abutments can still be seen on satellite images. So Ealand is shaped like a giant triangle, so I can walk round it in a circular fashion. It's not a linear place at all, this. The only trouble with that is that one of the sides of the triangle is the A161, and I believe it doesn't have a footpath, so I'm going to have to be very careful walking up there. It's worth walking up there though, because along the way I'm hoping to catch Clearwater Lake, which is off to the left as I walk up the A161, so hopefully we'll get a look at that. Our wander around Ealand begins at its very own war memorial. There are only 7 names on this one compared to Crowle's 91. There are 6 for World War I and just 1 for World War II. Ealand Playground is next, which sits on an area between Wharf Road and the A161. This area is known to locals as Chafers, characterised by a long strip of grass with a water channel running through it. Wharf Road used to be the main route through Ealand until the current A161 was built, bypassing it in the process. After walking for a while, there's a gap in the trees to the A161 and Clearwater Lake. So here is Clearwater Lake. There you go. Now, I believe this is actually a public footpath, but to access it you have to go through the entrance gates to this caravan park. I don't think you can get out the other end. I think it just goes all the way around the lake. So for that reason, I've stuck to the A161 and filmed it from here. Very nice, isn't it? It'd be better if the sun was out, but yeah, still a nice little landmark, I guess, in Ealand. Clearwater Lake is part of Seven Lakes Leisure Park, which is sited on the clay pits of the former Crowle brickworks, mentioned way back in this video's intro. I tell you, industry was everywhere here. Now we're on Outgate, the second of the triangle sides. This is Ealing Gate, a restaurant set within a red brick barn conversion which still has its original vaulted beams. That's some fine rural charm. Ealand has no shops, by the way. All it has in terms of retail would be this farm, Outgate Poultry, which sells fresh farm eggs. You can buy live pullets from them too. Their website is below. So we've almost completed two sides of the triangle here in Ealand. We've just got one side to go. You might be wondering what's in the middle of the triangle. And the answer is not really a lot. There's a little like infield section which has got a few cul-de-sacs and things like that, residential areas. Generally speaking though, it just seems to be farmland. Genuinely just been asked for directions to the post office here in Ealand. Now I haven't come across the post office yet. Interestingly, they asked me at this corner just there and they swore that Ealand has a post office. It may have had a post office in the past, but I haven't come across it yet, which tells me that it doesn't exist anymore. Could it possibly have been here where these houses are? That wasn't a bad guess, but I got a definitive answer to that question in a few shots' time. I was to discover that Ealand Post Office is on New Trent Street. We're heading for that road now. The final stretch of the walk passes Ealand Jubilee Primitive Methodist Chapel. This was built in 1882 and as of 2012 it was still open for worship. A schoolroom associated with this opened in 1890. Now we come to New Trent Street. Ealand's pub, called the New Trent Inn, was along here, but it no longer stands. New Trent was also the name given to the other brewery, by the way. Here's a picture of what the New Trent Inn once looked like. It had been derelict for years and now there are brand new houses on the site. To finish, we pass Ealand Victory Hall, the local community centre. Ah, could this have been the post office? There's a post box in the wall. I'm thinking Ealand's post office no longer exists. I'm almost all the way around this triangle, haven't come across it. If it wasn't up there where I was earlier, it's surely got to be this. But the post box in the wall and a shuttered door looks to me like a former shop. Surely that's where it was. Okay, I've got a few more paces to go and I'm back at the car, which I parked close to the train station, which means you guys need today's picture bit now. And just before we finish off this episode, one thing I haven't had a chance to talk about would be Tetley Hall, which sits between Crowle and Ealand. This is a lane towards the property in question. It has a long history with the Robinson family. This property is Sand Hall, where Samuel Brunny lived. Below there's a link to a very long article about these families and their importance to the whole Crowle and Ealand area. Well worth a read. Okay, that's it. I'm back on Wharf Road, heading for the railway station where I parked about 45 minutes ago. It's not a short trek around this triangle in Ealand. It's quite a long way. You don't realise just how big it is. It's not as big as Crowle, but it's certainly still a good 45-minute walk. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed this, and I've enjoyed Crowle as well, and it's good to put this town on the map, because this is a place which, generally speaking, gets kind of forgotten about in North Lincolnshire. A lot of people, when they think North Lincolnshire, they think Scunthorpe, they think places like Barton-on-Humber and Barnetby and other various places which I've yet to visit. They don't usually think Crowle, because it's kind of out of the way. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere in the north of the Isle of Axholme, but that's the point of the channel. It puts everywhere in the spotlight. So hopefully Crowle and Ealand now have got something to be proud of. And I'm moving on to my next one here in North Lincolnshire, and there's one left on the Isle of Axholme. That's not going to be the next video, but I will just mention the last one. It was supposed to be done earlier this year. It was supposed to be done in January. For obvious reasons, it didn't happen. I'm hoping the last one on the Isle will be done in 2023. You all know what it is, and yeah, it's going to be fun. But as far as North Lincolnshire goes, my next one's going to be somewhere else. It's going to be out towards Grimsby, so look out for that one. This has been the parish, the town of Crowle and Ealand, and I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.